Hi, back again for another video on the 3 most recent chapters of TOG, but first a little disclaimer. Chapters 6 and 7 were pretty sparse in terms of discussion-worthy content, so don't be surprised if I skip over them briefly. And of course there are a couple tidbits that I'd like to mention, but generally speaking, chapter 8 is where the real meat of this video lies. Also, I'm slightly sick while recording this, so if you're wondering why my voice doesn't really quite sound right, well, there's your answer. With that out of the way, let's dive right in. I guess if there's one highlight of chapter 6 for me, that would definitely be the not so subtle shift in BAAM'S personality and sort of general ideologies. This comes out in moments such as when he's jokingly mentioning that he can't stop the cage escape plan because he literally planted a bomb in the confiscated backpack, just like it's a nothing detail. BAAM really has no chill lately, and at first the almost unsure or nervous tone to his dialogue could be mistaken for carelessness or even ignorance of Dang Dang's feelings on his rescue, but I feel like it's actually just BAAM covering up his sheer confidence with an awkward smile. What I like about this depiction is that it combines the best of both worlds, meaning BAAM's more childlike side and his more viol-like side. Two sides of the same coin, but embracing both in the same way he's embracing his individual strength by scrapping his previously taught moves that were molded into him and coming up with his own distinct set of wave controller techniques. In that sense, I feel like this is the fruit starting to bear from his character progression in the Hidden Floor arc, where BAAM learns to reconcile with his former self, or Viol, and accept his full identity. Now, has SAU taken too long to demonstrate this and backpedal a fair bit? Probably, but I'm glad we're back on track with BAAM's character arc at the very least. Also, just a minuscule side note, but I think showing BAAM manipulating his Shinsu orbs far outside his immediate vicinity, sort of shooting them outside his prison cage and behind the supervisor, was a neat way to exemplify how BAAM is now taking control of the Shinsu space, because it's been previously hinted that the Shinsu-laced environment responds to his emotions and his willpower. This is also kind of supported by Mad Dog VARAGARV's comment on the Shinsu gathering around BAAM, progressively enhancing the intensity of his skills. So I definitely think we're going to get a mention somewhere in maybe the K9 2 festival about this element of BAAM's power subset. Hell, maybe I'm being too optimistic knowing SAU's slow pace, but I'd love if we got a proper explanation behind why Shinsu was drawn to BAAM in the first place. Moving on to chapter 7, VARAGARV is kinda boring now. What was once a mysterious character with unknown intentions, goals, and powers is reduced to this uninteresting caricature in one chapter. I was honestly hyped to see what he had to offer this story arc, but so far he's just made a cameo appearance and then just got washed by BAAM. His underlying emotions, just power hungry. His unknown abilities obtained from the Blood Tamaras, just a simple power boost. And then you've got the yellow angel chick who's just hanging around for some bizarre reason. Why isn't she doing anything to help VARAGARV? Or at least just support him? Why is she there at all if she's just gonna stand there like a concrete slab? The only thing I really enjoyed about this confrontation was the visual representation of Shinsu wildly shifting around BAAM, sorta like a storm. His badass line about those weaker than him, and what I'm about to mention next. Okay, rant over. So sort of wheeling back around to my interpretation of BAAM's new self-identity and more complete characterization, SAU gives us a flashback to his martial arts training. Now, I could not care less about Hai Chi, or whatever the fuck his name is. The reclusive martial arts master. I don't care. What I do care about, however, is how BAAM's new wave explosion technique ties to what I've been explaining. So he tried embracing himself through a new power set he designed for his clash with Data Zahad, but he was clearly still taking influences from elsewhere, and couldn't really find himself in these slew of techniques. So of course, BAAM'S started again from zero, which amusingly fits considering the blank state of his consciousness following the entrance to the tower initially. He was moulded by others without too much pushback, but now that he has the self-awareness and the confidence gained from experience, he's able to fully commit to developing his own style that reflects the mishmash of unique martial arts. I wouldn't call it proper zero, but it's as close as we're going to get. You know, KHUN and BAAM'S reunion was sweet, and I enjoyed that KHUN was the first person to comment on BAAM'S hairstyle change, cause best buddies and all. But if I'm being honest, I was infinitely more interested in the blink and miss it moment where KHUN questions Louis, assuming that he was Deng Deng. It's not necessarily the nervous reaction from Louis that I'm curious about, but that KHUN is perplexed that he got someone's name wrong for the first time, along with Deng Deng's silence and sweaty face. I mean, there's something clearly off about this exchange. Like, why would SAU incorporate this scene here? Why does KHUN make this mistake at all? Why does Deng Deng look suspiciously concerned about the situation? What purpose does this weird interaction serve? I can see three possibilities. One is SAU is trying to highlight that KHUN's temperature fluctuations are causing his cognitive functions to decrease, in sort of an effort to explain maybe a future mistake that KHUN makes. 2. Louis is actually the Rugrat Yama is after and doesn't realize it himself. 3. It's just a throwaway comment that's supposed to make KHUN's approach slightly sillier and more casual, I guess. I'm leaning heavily towards the second point, but does anyone have a different take on this? Let me know in the comment section if there's something maybe I've missed, because usually there is. Now this is something I've seen a lot of people were confused about, and honestly I was too, because SAU never stated how Deng Deng was somehow hiding within Yama's territory when it looked as if he was already chained up in the cage. Like he was literally fighting in a pit. You'd think Yama would have some clue as to the goings on in his gang. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, till now, because we find out in chapter 8 that KANZON, one of Yama's 3 most trusted subordinates, has been secretly guarding Deng Deng, likely with the help of his section supervisors, and now that BAAM intervened, he's decided to dispose of him. This helps clarify the seeming incompetence of Baylord Yama's rule, and throws an additional thread to watch out for on the K9-2 festival. Will KANZON'S switch to BAAM'S side? Is there a coup d'etat being planned amongst the executives of Yama's clan? And if so, why? It really does throw up a lot of questions that complicate the narrative just enough to potentially make this arc a little more unpredictable than I expected, which is great. If there's been one constant complaint I've had about SAU's arc structures lately, it would be that they're very Battle Shonen-esque, usually with BAAM like freeing an oppressed population from the tyranny of a villain group. You can see this in the Hidden Floor, Floor of Death, and even the Name Hunt Station, and while this arc doesn't seem to be bucking the trend completely, I'm glad that SAU is not making it that simple this time around. With regards to KANZON just as a character, SAU succinctly portrays the intended ideologies pretty quickly through the visuals alone, where he's pulling sort of a Zoro by lifting a fucking mountain of weights while his advisor enters the gym room. Like the ground literally crumbles when he drops it, so you gotta wonder if his carpenters are constantly reworking the concrete floor. It doesn't really seem like a properly suited training room if it can't withstand that ludicrousy on a day-by-day basis, but oh well, I wouldn't question him if I was the intendant. I think though this kind of perfectly shows, along with his comments about killing Deng Deng, that raw physical strength is going to be a big part of his reasoning for taking down Yama, probably asserting that Yama has lost his touch and is too soft or something along those lines. That's usually the way with gangs and stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if it fits YAMA'S clan as well. So was it just me, or was the dialogue really good this chapter? It sounds corny to say, but the conversation between Bam and Khun about Deng Deng's situation hit me on some sort of emotional level. Like recounting his original forced membership with FUG, his obvious empathy towards Deng Deng's inescapable role as Yama's prized rugrat lends to me at least a sense of personal stakes in the matter beyond the usual oppression arguments. I also loved Khun's perception of Bam, noticing that he's placing a firm hand on controlling authorities, including FUG's manipulation, so as to sort of take a hold of his circumstances and use their organisation more than the opposite way around. Though he notes that taking people by force is what a FUG slayer would do, so there is a nice moral dilemma being posed that will hopefully pay off as well. These conversations and thoughts are a nice full circle kind of sentiment that makes this arc feel more like a contrast to the workshop battle arc where his friends' lives were constantly threatened if he didn't obey as a slayer candidate. Instead of avoiding his friends out of fear FUG would kill them, he's now standing up for those around him to assert dominance and protect his comrades. And speaking of older arcs, the Season 1 crew inject a little life into this situation, reminding me of the good old Season 1 days where they would randomly show up in Bam's room when the trio were discussing something. LaSue was also kinda great with the whole scout equals no moral problem with eavesdropping thing, and how he actually keeps providing good ideas only to get dismissed by Khun. The poor guy doesn't get any respect from his peers. Actually, not even most of the fanbase has any strong feelings towards LaSue. So it was kinda nice to get a little moment where his positive psychology gets through to Khun when hearing about the FANG stealing ceremony. Even if the name of Yama's big tournament is goofy as all hell, I can't deny that the description Deng Deng gave for the rules of the FANG stealing ceremony makes me so much more optimistic about how engaged I'll be with this conflict. Turns out it's a Train City situation where the fighting is more akin to a sporting contest like Gridiron. The leaders divide themselves into an offensive and defensive zone where the Rugrat is supposed to protect a large Fang until midnight while under an onslaught of attacks from the strongest fighters in the cage. Now, on one hand, I am disappointed because this means that Bay Road is probably not the location of the K9-2 festival anymore, but on the other hand, the rules are pretty solid and the backstory behind the contest's importance is interesting. Though I'm kinda wondering if the ancient monster Yama slayed is more of a metaphor, or is the beast gonna break out midway through the match? I don't know, it might actually be that the large teeth surrounding Yama's royal hall are the teeth of this ancient creature. Or maybe they're just decorations, I really have no clue. So I don't take credit for this idea, but I noticed a couple comments on the latest chapter discussion thread on Our Tower of God, which pointed out that the Gus Evankel refers to is probably Augustus. If you're unaware who that is, then I'll explain. He's actually the pale-skinned, white-haired 20th floor test director and member of both FUG and the Chicken Love Club, who was very stipulate with tests proceeding as ordered. So here we've got another character from Season 2 Part 1 coming back into the story, and I mean, I dig that for sure, but I can't help but feel uneasy about SAU possibly butchering his character like Mad Dog VARAGARV. Now, it's not to say that he was that interesting in the first place, but I feel like if you're going to uncloak characters from their only source of intrigue, there has to be a decent reason. I can't accept more Yuhen Sung situations where SAU just drops the malicious vibes in order to make it plausible that they're working with BAM now. I want intrigue, I want mystique, I want malicious intent, because that was a huge part of why I liked Tower of God in the first place, and slowly that has come undone, but he can still bring it back, and he has brought it back in some circumstances, so I really hope that Augustus isn't completely just fumbled. So SAU reveals some of the background characters we'd seen with Yama prior, and while I don't care too much about Colden and Jordan, they do tell us a little bit more about the makeup of Yama's gang. So Jordan is number 8 and Colden is number 6 in the gang, which means apart from Gato and Kanzan, who are Yama's 2 right-hand men, we have numbers 4, 5 and 7 missing, with maybe more to come after that. And the second detail of note was that the bloodline transformations have stages apparently, with Jordan's depicted form being stage 2. SAU doesn't let us know how many stages there are, but this will definitely make Yama's inevitable full transformation more interesting, reminding me of how Luffy versus Lucci was handled in One Piece, where he had like different leopard versions of his devil fruit which presented different challenges for the fight. I'm guessing that what SAU will probably do is scale up the fight as it goes on, making Yama more fearsome and different and worthy of his name after a while. Now with Gato being Deng Deng's father, another wrench is thrown into the cogs. Actually wait, that sounds slightly too corny, but you get my point. It's just one more problem along with KHUN'S double crossing that's just going to shake up the ceremony as a whole, because it's super obvious that SAU wouldn't really incorporate that detail if it wasn't going to affect Gato's decisions. And I guess while I actually like KHUN'S design more for its on-the-nose muscular aesthetic, Gato's moral complexity of allowing Yama to exert slavery-like control over who I presume is his only son makes for more intriguing story twists, and his calm, rational personality really wins me over more than KHUN'S seemingly narrow-minded traits. You can probably tell, but I'm kind of looking for potential ways to shake up the tournament because I haven't really been too hyped for another bland tournament with none of SAU's signature plotting. In my mind, the workshop battle was the place to do a straight series of normal fights, or even Bay Road if we ever actually visit it. Here I'd like something a little bit different and closer to what I've been accustomed to over nearly 2 seasons at this point. Oh Bam, you poor silly idiot. Saying passive-aggressive shit to Baylor Yama in his own domain is a pretty ballsy move, but this is the kind of Bam I like. Not naive, even as he's arguing for naive causes. As we see earlier in Chapter 8, he understands that being firm about his stance is the only way to gain the respect of Yama, who's obviously used to controlling people with fear. It's obviously not the way Karaka would handle it, but I enjoyed those distinctions between Slayers. That being said, that panel with Yama leaping down in his transformed state with those like Karuko no basket eye streak effects was the kind of awe-inspiring that would make me absolutely shit bricks and like go into full retreat mode. Like I haven't been too intimidated or impressed with Yama just from his appearance or attitude, but this panel and the way he ever so quickly transforms back to threaten Bam kind of solidified his status as a full-blood slayer. I mean, Karaka's shaking in his boots, and he only does that for the right reasons, so I gotta give respect to Bam for standing his ground like a boss and pulling out another one-liner on a strong opponent. I actually like that SAU is kind of poking fun at the FUG name by switching up the meaning to imply Yama is a thug, or like a gang member, which I mean is exactly what he is, but it's a nice way to just sort of poke fun. This is so hype for me for a number of reasons, but I guess first let's take a look at the FUG Elder introduced with his envoy. So I don't think there's anything necessarily significant about the colour palette of the symbol or clothing choices of its attendants at the front, and I guess I am curious about how the box he's in is somehow moving without any support at all, but these details aren't important. What is, however, is the design of the FUG symbol, because if you'll notice, there are actually 6 eyes attached to a centered spike, with each eye almost certainly representing a FUG elder. We know this because SAU was shown us a small red panel back in Season 2 Part 1 with 6 shadowy figures meant to depict the FUG elders. Similarly to the 3 crimson-eyed symbol of Zahad's empire, which represents the 3 lords Moloch, Juchon, and Flux, this symbol is obviously designed in defiance and mockery of this establishment, since FUG's goal is of course to take down the system and replace it with their own sort of slightly less evil but still evil government. I think the next detail of importance is the spike, because when attached to the eyes, there's an eerie resemblance of Wulhek Sung's winged tree symbol. I honestly have no idea if this is like a coincidence or something more foreboding, but it could just be a conspiracy, but it's noteworthy anyways. Lastly, I don't like to be too egocentric about speculations or theories because I'm usually never right, but I totally predicted that AKRYUNG would return in my discussion video for chapters 1 and 2 of Season 3. I couldn't mistake that signature red teeth mark anywhere. Well, that's if it's a mask at all. Who knows, it might be the literal skin and teeth of AKRYUNG, since in Season 1 we do get a different close-up of his face, and there's like saliva coming out of his mouth. Anyways, I'm just super excited that he's back in the story after a long-ass absence. I think personally that this inclusion could add a ton back into Rak's character arc, as this was like an established rivalry in Season 1, and it would probably further enhance Rachel's party as well. Well, that's if Rachel's standing next to him. I'm actually not sure if it is Rachel, because there's the 2 FUG members we saw earlier standing in front of AKRYUNG, judging from their distinctive skin tones, and then there's another cloaked figure who, if you zoom in, kinda looks red. Now, unless Rachel's gotten some serious cosmetic surgery thanks to Gustang, I kinda doubt it's her. But at the same time, you'd think Hedon wouldn't abandon AKRYUNG's protection of Rachel? Or was that just for the flaw of Tess? Like, there's lots of questions, but no answers so far, because, you know, it's obviously just the cliffhanger of this chapter. But I'm still super hyped for the character, and just getting more Season 1 characters back into this, and just getting more characters that we still don't know a whole lot about. I know I had problems with Gus coming back into the story because there is a chance that SAU might ruin AKRYUNG's character through just explaining him and making us know who AKRYUNG is, because a lot of the interest was based around that mystique and that weird intrigue he has from being this like ghost murderer and stuff. But I'm not sure, like maybe SAU will handle it really well, and I guess that's what I'm hoping for, because this is the kind of shake-up that I like in an arc. You know, introducing the elders is going to be really cool, because it reminds me of how we saw all those new characters from different families in the Name Hunt station. I don't know. Anyways, I probably should wrap this up because my voice is starting to really hurt. But yeah, I think with all that said, I'm done with this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and sorry I said I'd release that RANT video last week, but that was pushed back due to rewrites of the script. I'm hoping for next week, but I'm not going to promise anything yet. If you want any updates on what I'm creating next, please do check out my Twitter page, linked in the description. Thanks, see you next time.